It's the start of another Diablo season, I have COVID, and I'm moving to Korea in 2 months, so there's a lot going on. But here's my speculative build for Stormclaw for Season 4. Now the changes that came in Season 4 put me in a bit of an awkward spot, because the tempering on weapons is really powerful, and Stormclaw traditionally uses a unique weapon, and that doesn't leave the option for tempering. The main version that I'm going to show you today is using Storm Strike instead of using the Great Staff of the Crone. This allows us to get the awesome lucky hit lightning damage from the weapon tempering. Now lucky for you guys, Mobalytics added an option so that I can add different variations of the build within the same build links. So now when you go to the build link, you can click on Lightning Storm Strike or Pure Stormclaw in order to see the different variations of the build. But like I said, we're going to stick to the Lightning Storm Strike for now. So for the skills, I'm using Storm Strike as the main way to apply our on-hit effects. It's also going to add Vulnerable to the enemies, which will help our damage multiplier. We're going to be using Shred for mobility, and we've actually also got Metamorphosis for mobility, but I'm going to see how it feels, and if I feel like I don't need one of them, I might drop one. I threw a Poison Creeper in here because I wanted a nice way to poison everything in a big area, while also applying the Immobilize that synergizes well with our lightning damage. But keep in mind, you can also apply poison with Shred, so you don't have to have Poison Creeper in order to do that. You also have the passive from Poison Creeper, so you're always going to have the bosses poisoned at least. I went with Earthen Bulwark so that we can break CC, and we don't have a good way to spam this, but we have a good amount of cooldown reduction in the build, so you should be able to use it when you need it. I also went with Hurricane. I brought this back into the build because I wanted the extra damage reduction. They stripped away a lot of damage reduction this season, so anywhere we can get damage reduction is nice. And then of course, Petrify. Petrify is great for stunning enemies, and it's going to increase your damage to enemies. For the Spirit Boons, I went with Wariness, Iron Feather, Avian Wrath, Calamity, and Overload. And I did put a note here, I recommend using Cataclysm until you have Erides, because I feel like Cataclysm puts out quite a bit of damage, especially in the early game. So for this version of the build, we're going back to the lightning and on-hit effects. And the reason for that is because now they scale with your weapon damage. For the aspects, I went with Crowded Sage and Assimilation aspect on the helm and the pants. That's for the extra dodge chance, but it's also giving us healing, and it's giving us Fortify when we dodge. I stacked a lot of dodge in the build with a lot of affixes and tempering, so the more dodge you can get, the better. I went for Concussive Strikes on the chest. This is a 20% damage multiplier, and it's giving us a way to daze enemies. And because we have so much lucky hit, and we're dazing enemies with this, and we're stunning enemies with this, and we're stunning enemies with this, freezing enemies with this, freezing enemies with this, we just have a lot of different ways that enemies are going to be completely unable to do anything to us. I went for Rapid on the gloves for the extra attack speed. Metamorphosis on the boots, like I said, for the mobility. A Cursed Touch on the one-handed weapon. This is going to give us a good way to apply Vulnerable to enemies without having to use the passive on Storm Strike. That frees up the passive to allow us to hit more enemies each Storm Strike. And with Overcharged on the amulet, Overcharge is a huge amount of damage, and I just really wanted to have the highest percent possible. I went for Mighty Storms aspect, and that's going to go with our Keystone passive, so we get guaranteed crits. I also went with Erides because I really like pulling enemies together, especially when you're using things like Overcharge and Overload. The closer enemies are together, the more damage you're going to do. And then finally, on the offhand, I went with the Runeworker's Conduit. And something I'm excited to try, but I don't really know for sure yet, is Tyrael's, the chess piece, because that does a flat amount of damage on skill use, and if we're attacking extremely quickly, we should be able to get a lot of damage off of that. And that's another possibility of what might make the Crone playable too. Now for the gear stats and the tempering, I highly recommend that you go to Mobalytics. You can click on the link below this video, or if you go on Mobalytics, you should be able to find my build through Meta Builds and Druid. But I highly recommend coming here and looking at this because it's a lot to go through. But for the most part, I'm trying to prioritize as much as possible the dodge chance, the lucky hit chance, the damage to close enemies, the evade cooldown, and of course on the weapons, the lucky hit chance to deal lightning damage. Now, of course, in a perfect world, you probably want to get all of your bonuses into what you care about the most. But for the ones on here that had a couple of good choices, I tried to list more than one so that you had a better idea of what you might be able to keep when you're not wanting to reroll. Of course, attack speed is very important in this build. I also really like maximum life, and I threw an armor stat and an all resist stat on here, but that's just so that you can have a little bit to play with in case you need that. If you don't know already, armor caps at like 9,300 this season for all content, so you don't need to go above it. For the gems, we're going with Sapphire on the weapon for the critical strike damage, Ruby on the armor. If you feel like you don't need the survivability, you could go with some willpower, but I really don't think it's worth it. And then of course with your jewelry, you always go for the resistances you need, and if you don't need the resist, then just go for skulls and get to that armor cap. For the gameplay loop, it's pretty simple. You're going to dash into enemies. You're probably going to activate your Hurricane or your Bulwark before going in. I typically activate Hurricane and I save my Bulwark in case there's CC. Once you're next to enemies, you're going to use Storm Strike, and that's going to trigger your on-hit effects. You can use Poison Creeper if you want to AoE poison or immobilize enemies. And Petrify is really good in a sticky situation, but if you're using Eridas, you're going to want to use Petrify all of the time. It's going to pull enemies towards you and you're going to be able to kill them much faster. Now for the skill tree, I don't think it's actually valuable to put a lot of points into our Storm Strike, because we're not really trying to build our damage on Storm Strike itself. It's pretty low damage, but we are trying to build our damage on all of our on-hit effects. Now, because Season 4 is brand new, I don't know 100% how it works right now, but I know in the past, certain things like Runeworker's Conduit would scale off of nature magic damage, but then things like Overcharge didn't seem to. So I'm not sure if they fixed that or not, but either way, we try and focus on damage that works for everything. But we still go for the nature magic damage because we have a lot of stuff that goes nature magic. So like I said for Storm Strike, we're going with Wild Storm Strike for the extra targets. We're going to grab 1 point in Shred and the 2 extra passives. This is going to be used as our dash and a way to apply poison. We're going to max out our Predatory Instinct and our Digitograde Gate. We're also going to grab Bulwark, and we're going to go up to Preserving Earth and Bulwark. We're going to max out Ancestral Fortitude and Vigilance, and then we're going to move down and we're going to get our 1 point in Poison Creeper and get Ferocious Poison Creeper. Now we're pretty much maxing all of the passives over here with Electric Shock, Bad Omen, Endless Tempest, and Charged Atmosphere. And then we're getting 1 point in Hurricane and Savage Hurricane. We're going to be maxing out our Envenom, and we're also going to get the 1 point in Toxic Claws so that our Shred can apply poison. Moving down to our ultimate, we're either going to grab Cataclysm or we're going to grab Petrify. And we're going to max out all of the passives here: Defiance, Natural Disaster, and Resonance. Finally, for our Keystone passive, we went with Earth and Might. Now, if you prefer, you could always go with Earth Sign Strength for the extra damage and get your crit elsewhere, but I felt like the investment for the amount of crit you'd want to get is not worth it, because this can work just as well. For the Paragons, on the first board, we're starting with Keeper. Then we're going to move up and we're attaching Heightened Malice. Here we're going to be putting the Earth and Sky Glyph, and then we're going to move left. Here we're going to attach the Constricting Tendrils board, where we're going to put Territorial. Moving up from here, we're going to attach the Thunderstruck board, and here we're going to put Electrocution, and we're maxing that baby out. Then moving to the right, we're going to attach the Inner Beast board, and here we're going to get Fulminate. Finally, moving to the right one more time, we're putting Ancestral Guidance, and here's where we're putting our Spirit Glyph. And this is what the full board looks like. Now, it's possible that Stormclaw might not shine in Season 4, but I think this build has potential. The more powerful builds this season are likely the ones that have a chance to cast an additional time. So that'd be like Tornado, Landslide, those types of things. But I know I've got some diehard Stormclaw fans, so use this for now, and I'll tweak it as I go. But I appreciate you guys watching the video. If you haven't already, comment, like, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.
Why do I have COVID again?